We're talking today about Uhuru's Big Four agenda over the next 5 years up until 2022, and also paying special focus to the budget cycle and where we are. Take a look at this that's coming up on your screen. Important for you to know where exactly we are. And this is, the final one, January to March. And these are the activities that are taking place this month. The national government is publishing their second quarter implementation reports. The budget policy statement is to be submitted to Parliament. By the end of the month, they should have been approved by Parliament, as well as what's happening at the county assemblies. And we're here with Anzetse Were, who's a development economist, Wanjiru Gikonya, who's from the Institute for Social Accountability. I think the question to you, Wanjiru, would be this. Right? So considering 3 of the areas in Uhuru's Big Four are actually devolved functions, what would you say would be the key thing for us to note, and perhaps going forward, in terms of, how we make sure that counties and national governments are speaking to each other, whether their priorities are indeed aligned, and also speak to public participation and the quality of it, because that is key, isn't it?
What we need to see, and I'm hoping we're going to see this from the Council of Governors, is a very strong pushback towards this, and a demand for a discussion around these priorities and around that policy that has not been implemented. We also need to see, and would like to see, associations like that represent informal trade, the cooperatives, because they are directly affected. It's very gentle, but the government doesn't talk about MSMEs. They're talking about SMEs, which is fine. But, we've got 85% of employment in the informal sector. And when you're getting into issues like agriculture, when you're getting into, a lot of sectors, you're talking about a lot of it actually being at the MSME level. So it's very good to try and uplift informal sector, but then you have to put it in the proper political context. And saying, reading the language, I didn't see that inclusion. I didn't see the emphasis on associations, supporting cooperatives. We've been, we get a sense that cooperatives are actually faring worse, in the last 5 years, like in the milk industry. We're seeing negotiating power being undermined by the national government because of the way it conducts its policy implementation. So the issue of devolution, the issue of public participation are very interlinked, even though it is the national budget. Because national government tends to say, well, this is the national budget, let us do our thing. We have a small section on devolution. No. Everything you do is being done under devolved government, should have the intergovernmental framework, and should have the genuine stakeholders around the table. Now, these dialogues have actually happened at sector level in some cases. Unfortunately, the BPS is not bringing on board the recommendations of these stakeholders when they've sat with the ministry. So the BPS, unfortunately, is actually has been separated from the regular government sector dialogues. Now, what is that? That's an ideological approach, and I agree with Dr. Oluga. It's about leadership. It's about saying that we're going to become coherent, we're going to talk to one another, and we're going to, MDGs the SDGs now are about leave no one behind. It's about inclusive development. We're not seeing that inclusive development in this BPS.
All right. And let's say, where are we? What keeps you awake at night? With this one, and how do we get ourselves to a better place with our economy?
I think broadly the concern I'm having with this budget policy statement is that it seems to be more of what we've been seeing in the past 5 years, which has increased our debt from 40% of debt to GDP ratio, and we're sitting at about 60% now. Now, debt in itself is not a problem if it's used efficiently and effectively, but of course we have questions around that in terms of whether fiscal policy is efficient. One of the big things that's really worrying me right now is the second Eurobond that we're going to be floating later this year. If you look at the first Eurobond, this this second Eurobond is actually being floated to pay part of that first one. But the next, in 2024, $2 billion is going to be due in 2024. Now, if we issue a second Eurobond this year, let's say it becomes actually active next year, we may find a situation where not only $2 billion is due in 2024, we have a situation where some of the bond that we're getting into today is also due then. And one of the things that is coming across as, it's looking as though government is pushing the date of maturity further along so that they're not the administration.
Beyond 2022?
Yeah, so that they're not the administration that has to deal with that Eurobond when they all start to mature in 2024. So I think one of the key things that we need to do is we need to get an Office of Budget Management under the Office of the President. Right now, Ministry of Finance, for some reason, seems to be very distant from the Office of the President in terms of articulating the fiscal support for the vision the President has. We also need that Office of the Budget Management in the Office of the President so that that sense of accountability happens. One of the biggest problems we're having right now in Kenya is the sense of financial accountability at both national and also at county level. When money is lost, nothing happens at both national and county. It's not that county are innocent. County governments have serious holes in their fiscal policy and their fiscal implementation as well. And one of the problems we're having is that lack of accountability. I think in terms of reining in the debt a bit, particularly from national government, is we need to get the Council of Governors on board, because what is happening is that the more money we have to spend on debts, the less there is to give to counties. So one of the very practical things we can do is to get governors very serious around managing our debt, get into this 3% fiscal deficit that has been pushed forward year after year after year, so that the counties get the money that they ought to be getting, rather than it being gobbled up by all this debt we're getting into.
Okay, the quick one, finally, as we finish. We all want the same thing in this
Yes.
country, and that can be reflected.
I think one of the things we forget is that when we look at what we want as Kenyans, we all want the same things. We want good schools, we want good hospitals, we want to be able to feed our families, we want to be able to have decent housing. And I think one of the problems that we've had, particularly in terms of the way we view governance, is that if your party isn't in power, you sort of stop listening and you sort of criticize everything that's happening. When really what we should be doing as Kenyans is coming together and saying, these are the foundations that we all believe in, which is good health, good food, etc., stable families, secure nations, food secure nations, and really coming together and pushing for that as a people, regardless of who is in power. But what we do now is that if your person is or isn't in power, that suddenly changes the conversation you have with the governments of the day. I think we really need to rethink that and come back to what unifies us as a people.
All right, indeed. And that perhaps would be the quality of public participation. And that's a development economist and Wanjiru Gikonyo from the Institute for Social Accountability.